And the session will be chaired by Eugene Downs, the Chief Executive Officer of Culture Ireland. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane. Are these moving too? They are. We have a sliding platform here. It's very high tech. Jane, thank you very much indeed, and welcome again, everyone. And thanks to John for an eye-opening address. I think this morning got us off to a great start. We're here in Wood Quay. I mean, this is a very historic place. I remember as a 6-year-old in 1978 being on a protest march through Dublin to save what was the most significant, early Viking urban site in Europe from being bulldozed, which unfortunately happened anyway. But certainly the construction of this is a kind of act of expiation in a way for the terrible loss of that time. So we're in here right in the entrails, if you like, of one of the most significant Viking settlements. So some of that maybe wild Viking energy, maybe percolating. Now we have an hour. So this is actually quite a tight session. Obviously we have a number of panellists up here and very much drawing in the floor, hopefully at an early stage, and getting a good conversation going. But we're talking about sustainability of relationships in particular between venues, festivals, the artists and companies they work with, but also the other parts of the ecology that make it work. Because sometimes the issues are artistic, of course, in terms of the way a relationship takes wing, the long-term viability of that, how the energy really develops and creates a strong long-term relationship. So sometimes the issues are artistic, sometimes the factors are financial, operational, or other things that impact. And hopefully we'll open up all of those. And obviously in a time of crisis or of shifting sands over the last couple of years, maybe these factors have altered, and maybe the future for fostering these kinds of really sustainable relationships maybe points off in a slightly different direction. But our panellists hail both from the near abroad, to use I think Vladimir Putin's term, and the further abroad. So just briefly to introduce, on your left, my right, starting with Padraig Cusack, who's the associate producer of the National Theatre in London. And I don't know whether, Padraig, again, technically it's the National Theatre of Great Britain.
Yeah, I feel very uncomfortable about that, actually. I just like to say we're another national theatre on the island of Great Britain. Especially with kind of National Theatre of Wales and National Theatre of Scotland doing such extraordinary work. And kind of breaking boundaries left, right and centre. And I feel at the National Theatre in London is disappointingly conventional. We've got a building and we just put on regular plays time and time again. But yes, I am from the National Theatre.
Thank you for that clarification. And this is like one of those shows on Radio 4 where we kind of go around the panel briefly. And then next we have Tisa Ho, who has been the executive director of the Hong Kong Arts Festivals, of course one of the largest scale multi-art form festivals in East Asia, and not Tisa's first visit to Dublin, but delighted to have her back here. And then Mike Griffiths, who so many of you will be familiar with as the long-time administrative director of the Travers Theatre in Edinburgh, but for the last couple of years Mike has been on secondment to the Scottish Government and looking after their relationship with the national companies of Scotland, the opera, the ballet, the National Theatre of Scotland, and so on, and the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, among others. And then beside him, we're quite Scottish heavy today, we have the executive producer of the Travers Theatre and formerly of the Lyceum, and otherwise Linda Crooks is with us, and again not her first time here, but you're very welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
And then finally, from North America, an old friend of Irish work and a great champion of Irish work down the years, Tina Rasmussen, the artistic director of World Stage and the head of the Performing Arts Programme at Harbourfront, which of course is one of the main multi-art form centres in Canada at the heart of Toronto on the waterfront. Tina, welcome.
Thank you.
Back to Dublin. So that's our panel. We'll be starting off perhaps a little closer to home with the neighbouring island, and then opening it up to Asia and North America after that. So perhaps we might start back with Padraig, who commutes, in terms of sustainability of relationships, commutes from his home in West Cork to London on a weekly basis. But in terms of looking at how the National, which is obviously this extraordinary engine of creativity, Padraig, how you found as a producer there the sustainability of the projects you've been working on, how the National works with artists and other partners, and both maybe the national and the international, because again you focus, I know, a lot on the international relationships and the touring.
When you started that conversation, that statement, I thought you were going to focus on my carbon footprint.
No, I'm not one to throw stones in that department.
Thank you. I think the National Theatre in London, its approach to its partnerships is driven in a variety of different ways. Oh, sorry. Right. Can you hear me now? Any better? Sorry. Don't get me technical. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Sorry. Okay, any better now? No? I've got a dodgy one, have I? Yeah? I just don't speak very well. Right, I'll just shout. Our approach to partnerships are driven in different ways. One is kind of artistic, one is kind of operational, one is a kind of our objective to have as national a profile as possible, being a national theatre, not being just London focused. And then there are kind of operational partnerships and sharing. I think starting with the first one, the kind of artistic, being a kind of a large, well-funded organisation, we're fortunate to be able to attract the sort of artists that we want to engage with, for the most part. But sometimes partnerships emerge because there is somebody or there is a company who has something that we can't get. And in order to get what you want, you sometimes have to come up with a deal. And going back over the years with the various artistic directors of the National, we have had, I suppose, informal partnerships on an artistic level. I think the first one that I was aware of working at the National was under Richard Eyre, where we had a sort of a relationship with Ex Machina in Canada, in Quebec, and Robert Lepage. And he creates kind of extraordinary, unusual work, some of which I think has played at the Dublin Theatre Festival over the years. And it's something that we knew we could never create, but we knew we had resources that perhaps we could offer that would be appealing to him to be able to create some interesting work that perhaps wasn't possible for him operationally or financially in Quebec. And so a kind of dialogue started on an artistic level to see how we could create something together. And so an ongoing relationship, partnership happened. Not written down in a contract anywhere, but it was just that kind of relationship between two artistic minds. And that was a very fruitful partnership. A more recent one would be under Nick Heitner's directorship, is with Complicity, Simon McBurney's company. Again, kind of very individual, kind of individual voice, groundbreaking at times, with a particular kind of remit to embrace kind of different cultures at times. And that was something that we weren't able to do. And again, Nick engaged with Simon to create a sort of a relationship and a partnership, us sometimes starting some of their work, creating it at the National in London, before then Complicity take it on the road and travel the world. Those were exciting partnerships because it was bringing in a kind of an artistic energy into our organisation that perhaps we couldn't capture. We have on a kind of national, with a small n level, established partnerships with venues around England, and they, I suppose, our objective there was to make sure that we have a kind of a presence at certain areas around the country on a fairly regular basis, so that the communities in those areas had a feeling of the Nationals coming to town on a regular basis, with more than just a production, sometimes educational work, discussions, platforms. And so we have a partner in the northwest, in Salford, in the northeast, in Newcastle, and in the south, in Brighton, and in the southwest in Bristol. And they're very kind of fruitful partnerships, but it's mainly us taking what we do and what we make and the kind of activities, the additional activities that we can produce to those venues. So sometimes it feels a little bit one way. I'm sure some of those venues would like it to be two-way, and that we might take some of their work on our stages. And certainly that's something that we do look at. I think we've had partnerships that have come the other way, where we've seen work around the country that we think would sit comfortably on our stages and would add a sort of another dimension to the work that we do. Our most recent partnership, now I'm getting loud.
A bit of feedback there, for sure.
Our most recent partnership is with the Abbey Theatre in Dublin. And that occurred kind of quite fortuitously, because we in London were having a look at perhaps producing an O'Casey play, and we looked at a number of them, all of which were the rights were unavailable, and we made kind of various overtures to the companies who had those rights, and it looked as though it was going to be kind of an impossible partnership to establish. Until we discovered that the Abbey had wanted something that we had in the shape of our director, Howard Davies. And that was really, really fantastic news, because then there was some negotiation to happen, and we had that negotiation, and then quite a kind of enjoyable, fruitful partnership happened in the form of Juno and the Paycock, which has just opened at the Abbey and comes to London in November. What was also particularly enjoyable about that partnership was the kind of sharing of kind of operational expertise. As a large organisation with an awful lot of staff, and it was rather embarrassing hearing how few staff the National Theatre of Wales have. I won't admit how many we have. But there is a tendency for a large organisation to get wrapped up in how it operates and never look kind of outward as to what we might learn from another company. And coming to the Abbey, we, particularly on the production side, learned things which, I've got to admit, surprised us, because, not to sound arrogant, but I think at times we think we know how to do it best, and we don't. And that was a really enjoyable part of the partnership. So I think we, as a large organisation, have a lot to learn by establishing partnerships with smaller companies, touring companies, small venues elsewhere. The last partnership that I'll mention, and then I'll shut up, is being a larger organisation, we have quite a lot of expertise, because we have the resource to develop that expertise in areas that smaller companies don't have, which could be to do with health and safety, HR, fundraising. And what we've done in the last 12 months is to start sharing that responsibility, that expertise with other companies around the country, so that rather than smaller companies trying to reinvent the wheel, a wheel that we've already got running pretty efficiently, we then outsource our expertise to some of those companies. And that's, I think, been a really good use of our Arts Council funding, our sponsorship, that we now have knowledge that we can share to other companies, and that's been received kind of with open arms from the companies that we've partnered up with. So there's kind of a snapshot of some of the partnerships that we have at the moment.
Well, thanks, Padraig. And can I just ask briefly about maybe the HD Live initiative? Yeah. Because again, I mean, I suppose the NT has been absolutely in the vanguard in terms of spoken word, with the Metropolitan Opera maybe in terms of music. But how is that? I mean, that's a whole different set of people to start a partnership with. I mean, it's taken you into a whole new realm. Yeah. But is that something that has quickly settled down? I mean, do you see this now as being core to your operations really now for the long term? Absolutely,
yeah. It's been a huge success. I mean, a kind of a surprising success. And I've got to admit, I was slightly sceptical, because I've seen, recorded, videoed productions of plays broadcast on television that have, I think, done theatre a terrible disservice. Because they just look dull and unanimated, and you don't have that kind of experience of live theatre. So I was kind of quite anxious about it. And opera is a completely different world. You've got all the elements: the music, the scenery, the costumes. It moves your heart, and also very often the narrative is quite simple, and drama can be kind of a lot more complicated and multi-layered. And I just thought, I'm not sure whether this is going to work. But I think the approach that we've had to it, including elements beyond just what happens on stage, a sense of being part of the pre-show activity, the audience in the space, that you are actually witnessing a live performance rather than just a recording of something, I think has made it work. I mean, the thing that's really surprised us is now, we never intended to cover our costs. We thought it would always require subsidy, but it now covers its costs, which is kind of a huge relief to us. And we're accessing audiences right across the world. And because I manage quite a lot of the touring operation, and sometimes the scale of the work that we tour can only go to venues of a suitable size, so there are lots of places that we don't reach. The NT Live program means that we can go to really small places where, as long as they've got the equipment to show a film, then we can broadcast to them. So the kind of access to a huge population, not only in the UK but right across the world, has been quite extraordinary. And in the UK now, we're performing or broadcasting to 125 cinemas, which we would never have dreamt of a year and a half ago when we kicked this off. And what we've done also in the last year is we've brought on one or two other companies and included their work. So we had a production from the Donmar Warehouse, we had a production from Complicity. Because I think, having developed the kind of network, I think it would be foolish of us not to kind of share that with other companies and just expand the kind of range of work that is made available to as wide an audience as possible.
I think really interesting. I mean, that's an eye-opener in terms of relationship with audience and sustainability and all of those things. I'm sure there may be pick-up on that, Padraig. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move over now to north of Hadrian's Wall, while maybe the mic can be reset for Tisa there. Now, Mike and Linda, we might do a double act to some extent, chipping in between you, maybe in terms of speaking about the Laurel. Well, no, I didn't hear that clearly. You were off mic, I think, Linda. The Traverse obviously is in a pretty unique place, I know, because so many, both of the international colleagues who are here, and of course the Irish artists and companies have worked with the Traverse down the years. And again, I mean, you've been known for developing longer term relationships with artists, and the arc of working with writers, and I suppose the delicacy of the new work and the process of bringing new work to the stage maybe calls for that longer term relationship. But would you like to talk to us maybe about how you see working both maybe artistically with the writers but also with the companies, and also the practical, the operational, financial aspects of that, and maybe how also it's changed, or whether you see that the dynamic of that may be changing over the last couple of years?
I think that it's key to say that the Traverse is a new writing theatre, so our priority is obviously the development of new work, and in particular Scottish work. So we commission and we produce, and we're also receiving house. And over and above that, there is the festival, the Edinburgh Festival, that is the key focus of our calendar year. As a key festival venue. So we're many things, and as a result we have many partnerships that we seek to fulfill. And I think the core to those partnerships must be about shared values, a shared sense of integrity, and building trust across over much time. It doesn't happen quickly, although I have to say John's description of what he's achieved over the last year is quite gobsmacking. We're 50 years old, and I'm tired just listening to you, so it really is very impressive. Mike, I don't know if you want to say a bit about the journey we got.
Well, I just thought it's kind of interesting, because I think the relationship with Irish theatre sort of kicked off again in the mid-90s when Philip Howard took over as director, and obviously had a very good relationship with Rough Magic here and with Corcadorca Enda in particular. And from that relationship and the many visits those two companies and artists have done, we built up a knowledge of Ireland and Irish theatre, relationships with other companies, which was then in turn supported by the Arts Council in providing come and see money, the Irish Theatre Institute in getting us to come over and meet more people, and of course Culture Ireland in supporting those companies to come over. There was a period of time when we really wanted to get lots of Irish companies, but we just couldn't find the financial deals that made that possible for everybody, and the support of those three organisations has been absolutely invaluable in forwarding and increasing the opportunities that we've had to see Irish work in Scotland, and for Irish artists and companies to bring their work to Scotland. And it's been interesting because it's also a stepping stone for the companies. So coming to Edinburgh is quite often a great stepping stone to go and do other things. And while we're not a halfway house, because we always want those companies and those artists to come to Edinburgh, it is a fantastic advantage to be part of a huge festival and to have, you know, a completely different audience from the rest of the year. The festival in the Traverse is a huge part of our year, and we've done over roughly each year, it's around about 500 performances we do, both in the Traverse and on tour, but the majority of those performances happens in those 3 weeks in August when lots and lots of people come in, and there are lots and lots of performances within that building. I mean, there's many people here who've experienced it, and I hope in general it's been a pleasant experience. I think it has to have been because, you know, even since 2001 we've had over 22 Irish productions coming to the Traverse, and a couple more from Northern Ireland, and I certainly feel, although I'm, you know, not at the centre of the Traverse at the moment, but I certainly hope that it will carry on under Orla and Linda, because it's been a very, very fruitful and enjoyable time, and absolutely fantastic learning process. One of the things that did come out of the relationship was an opportunity for us to look at work differently. We were very, very focused on new writing, and it was coming here and seeing pieces like Ladies and Gents in the toilets in St Stephen's Green that allowed us to bring in new forms of theatre that we hadn't really approached before, and bringing Ladies and Gents and Chambermaid and the Performance Corporation was absolute joy, and we got such tremendous feedback both from our audiences and from the critics in Scotland that yeah, it's been really interesting.
Well, was that the first time that Traverse had gone off-site or site-specific for the festival programme?
First time in a long time. We had done pieces in a laundry, but
laundry,
that's going back to mid-80s, I think.
Yeah.
So in a way you felt that opened the door, which brought you towards, again, say the Drill Hall and Black Watch and all of those other, or Roadkill. I mean, again, some of the hits of recent years have been off-site, haven't they? Yeah,
and we did start off where we always did in those days, and taking it from the basis of the writing. So, you know, we were trying not to be gimmicky about it and saying, actually, the reason we want to do this is because we really like the script. And from that, actually, I think it gave it an integrity that we could have been tempted away from had we just gone for the baubles and the glitter.
And can I ask maybe, again, Linda or Mike, some houses which I suppose are a new writing house and that really value that longer term relationship, particularly with writers, but maybe also with the ensembles or the companies, would make a conscious decision to programme a piece of work, even if you have significant reservations about the work, but because of its place in the arc of the writer's career, and because the value you put on being a dependable partner almost, or that level of... How do you kind of work through those trade-offs, do you feel, at Traverse?
That will be Orla's challenge going forward into the future. I just feel I should just acknowledge that Orla O'Loughlin, who's our artistic designate, is sitting here. But I think that it's a complicated journey. As I say, nothing about the Traverse is easy. This is I've just gone through my second festival, and I'm just about still standing, because the demands on the organisation are huge. The expectation of the organisation are phenomenal, domestically but also internationally. And as a colleague, Michael Mashallah, was telling me, our wine's not quite up to scratch, so that's also something we've got to take on board very, very seriously.
But the chips are good.
The chips are excellent. Tina would beg to differ. I think that it's I think it's very, very important that we are mindful of all of the partnerships and the commitment. We pledge our commitment to try and do the best for new writers. And of course the other thing is we'd quite like to bring our work to you. So it's a two-way street here. We'd like to visit, and we are hopefully going to be in conversation with some people about one of our festival productions, Future Proof. I think in the end, curating a programme is one of the hardest jobs on the planet, and I'm saying this being very mindful that Orla's contemplating what that feels like when she steps fully into position in January. And it's very important from the outset. We're clear about what we can actually deliver. Some people will be disappointed. And again, going back to what John said earlier on, it's very important that we get out there and we see as much work as we possibly can, because it matters. Does that answer the question?
There was a brief conversation that goes back about 6 years ago when I was talking to Philip, and we were talking about success and how do you get successful new plays. It's always a difficult thing to be doing. And we were trying to work out what we did differently, and I think the way we tried to define it was that we were trying to invest in playwrights as opposed to plays. And I know there are other new writing houses that invest in plays, but in a small country of 5 million people, we wanted to have an investment in the playwright so that they would continue to write. And they're not always going to do the perfect play, but there will be enough of them that will allow them to develop it. And that's the really big thing. When I first joined the Traverse, a lot of the playwrights, as soon as they got their first successful play, they were snatched up by TV and we didn't really see them again. And what's been really fantastic, particularly in Scotland, is that the playwrights have come back to write for us again and again and again. And that's been really important, because it's allowed the art of playwriting to be important, and it's allowed new young playwrights to have people that they can follow and to be mentored by. And in the last 15 years, I think that whole landscape in Scotland has changed, and it's been inspired by the work that we've seen from Ireland, and the playwrights themselves have been inspired by the work that we've managed to bring over. So it's been hugely influential to us.
It's an interesting comment, and one that resonates, as I say, particularly about the relationship with the writer. It also opens up the question about non-literary production, I suppose, and how you can develop a relationship with ensembles or people who are making work in other ways. Have you found, again, with such a strong traditional base in working with the individual writer, the individual playwright, have you made a conscious effort to work then with ensembles that devise, or the different dynamic of that?
There's been opportunities to take that on, which I think came out of the site-specific work. So, it was really exciting to have Chambermaid in the Caledonian Hotel, just because it's such an extraordinary building and such an extraordinary place with, some of the most expensive hotel rooms in Edinburgh, and to take up one of those and have 20 people seeing a piece of dance with the fantastic backdrop of the castle was kind of awe-inspiring. But there were opportunities, because we came to Dublin to see, the theatre writing. There were other things that we that came into our radar that we said, actually, that's just fantastic, and our audiences will love that. And Cosh Game have been back at Dance Base, because obviously the experience of coming to Edinburgh inspired them to come back as well. So.
I think that just to develop the partnership with looking to Mike with his government hat on, that certainly the Traverse punches well above his weight in terms of bringing work. In fact, Tina and Harbourfront brought Dance Marathon, which was first seen in Cork, for us to the Traverse this year, and again team from New York came. Now it's hugely expensive for us to bring companies, to international companies, to the festival, and we operate as a festival, but we're not quite. We're a fringe venue, so to have some kind of support to support work coming into the Traverse would be very gratefully appreciated. Mike.
Luckily, I only deal with the national performing companies at the moment.
We can be national.
Well, I mean, Linda and Mike, thank you very much, and I think we'll be coming back to this, and I know, of course, for the Irish artists and ensembles, and certainly for the international partners here, there's no doubt that for that month in August, Traverse is really the hub for that new work, and particularly since the International Festival still hasn't got an artist club or a festival club, everyone ends up back at the Traverse anyway, so also the social hub.
The Irish do anyway.
Well, thank you for that objective comment. And I think in a way it segues on nicely to Tina. Before I come, we should just say once again, knowing that Orla hasn't even taken up her post fully until January, but taking one of the hottest hot seats in British theatre. Welcome again to Orla, to Dublin for the first time. We'd love to claim you as Irish, but I think, well, that's for you to respond. But Tina has been, I mean, again, brought in terms of Dance Marathon. It's an interesting link, I suppose, from Traverse across to Harbourfront in Canada, because Tina working much of the time as a presenter, but also as a producing house and making work. You see both sides of that equation, and I suppose we know the economics of presenting work as well as making work have changed and perhaps are changing again. So how do you see the sustainability of the kinds of partners you work with to present internationally, but also to bring work from Harbourfront abroad?
Well, I think that, first of all, like artist development is audience development. I think that's really an important statement. And in fact, we don't produce work, we develop artists and companies. So then, like Padraig was saying about like all the expertise that we have, our international touring opportunities are made by like the relationships that I mine. So like thinking about the audience here, like if you're young producers and have work that you want to move, first of all, the readiness is all. Like, are you ready to tour? And if so, how is that exchange possible? And like knowing who and where you're going to tour. But I think for me, with like the exchange or the partnerships is really, again, working closely with the artists to really understand who the audience is. And when you do your research and you know where you need to go, that you're actually proposing to your potential partner how you can solve their inherent problems. So like with Dance Marathon, it's about, you know, how to have a younger audience at the Traverse, off-site, that isn't necessarily seemingly text-based work, but it's new writing. So there's a great pitch. And we commissioned the piece and we helped co-produce it, but in fact, much of it was done with the company to build their capacity and to continue our relationship. And it was because of the trust and the loyalty that we have with Linda, with Mike in the past, and now with you, hello. You know, we were able to achieve that kind of partnership. And I think though, like in terms of the sustainability, I think it was Elm Green and Dragset that were here. Like today we're not going to talk about the environment, like the sustainability of relationships. Like, I mean, I have to say that like I'm just as terrified as like the artist, like the how to continue the relationship and like how do I hold up my end of the bargain and how do I do that effectively.
And have you found, I mean, have there been huge changes, say, in terms of how you can operate in Toronto over the last couple of years?
Oh,
in terms
totally.
Of the model?
There's really so little money. I mean, that's really significant. I mean, my program was cut $235,000, and then for the subsequent year, another $235,000. You know, like it's just so it's the amount of dollars to do this. So it's like we have to be inventive, and if that's a trade or if that's some kind of residency or collaboration, like there's a €400,000 fund for 3 European companies to make work in to Canada. Well, if you've got some ideas, like let's do, you know, be as aggressive as possible in trying to mine proposals. Like, I think that's it. A lot of times it's not about here's our work. It's actually, or this piece, like this show, like this, it's more to look at, you know, this is myself as an artist or myself as a company, and no might just mean no right now. It doesn't mean it's a long-term relationship. And I know, like out of the 17 people I'm seeing in the seat or later this afternoon, like I know 90% of the company. Like it might not be that I'm going to take this work, but I know the work, and can I just say this? I don't know, like, just if this is off the topic, but if you know that there's other festivals or things, like there's IETM right now in Krakow, or like it costs $200 for me to go from here to Krakow. So if you are, like, do your research, because 100% of the time, the best is for someone to actually see your work. So if you can get us here to see your work, only target don't target the 8 million presenters there are in the world. Target a few of like where you think your work is going to be the best. Like, is it Australia as a market? Is it North America? And then target a few that you're going to build, like, because it's dating, eHarmony all the way.
And in a way,
you can't date too many people. It gets very complicated.
That's a laugh of recognition. And Tina mentioned again just that it's not about a quick yes or a quick no, but maybe that long term, maybe. 2 seasons ago, again, when we worked with Harbourfront and bookended the season of World Stage with Irish work, starting I think with Druids Walworth Farce, and then closing the season with Giselle from Fabulous Beast, and of course Michael Keegan-Doan's new piece opening tonight. Hopefully many of you will be at that in the Gaiety, Rian. But that was probably a 5-year process, Tina, from seeing that work and then just letting it, I mean, how would you, that was definitely not a short-term process to put that together.
No, not at all. Really, and I have to say, like, the women of ITI and Eugene, you guys in this country have a really great program here, because you have organizations, and also all of your international ADs like Rasha, Willie now, Lachlan, Tom, Paul Fahy. They're also your gatekeepers, and you're the portals to the world, and like definitely make sure that you have good relationships, because we do talk about the work. So like being invited to Ireland the first time, and then the repeat invitations, you get to have a more intimate knowledge of like what actually is happening in the ecology here. You also have a good conversation with, maybe my outside eye might be able to help organize or see something in a different way. And again, like, how do the artists or the work that you're doing is going to be able to respond to my audiences, and my audiences are going to be many different to Kilkenny's audience, maybe, or what is a Simpatico's. So it's like, and also trends, and how trends might be in one way here, but they're not the same way in Canada. So this is about timing as well. I mean, like Gavin with Pan Pan, I've seen many of his works, which I'm very happy to. And now, like, Playing the Dane seems to be the thing that's like catching on. And it's like, it's a long-term process, but it's this continued investment in like people like Eugene, Jane, Siobhan, Jen, that continue to say, like, Ireland is a place that, and is having the conversations with the artists that say, first of all, are you ready to have an international life? That's really key, because a lot of times artists aren't ready, and that doesn't, so it's like really packaging that. So it is a long-term process. It does pay off. Like, I mean, that was an incredible season, really bookended. I mean, ultimately, I would have liked to have done more. I would have liked to work with our own International Festival of Authors and create kind of like a bigger Irish synergy, and do something else around, anything around like even culture, the culture of food or design, or other social issues. But I remember, was it Declan from the up north, he was talking about his show about the poles and in the rural areas. I can't remember the name. Yeah, but he's since left that company. But what can I do with this work? I think that might have been ahead of its time in many ways. Like that kind of like social action, like, while it was happening here, it was an urgency here. I think now there might be a different pickup on that, depending on what's happening in the world, and again, where does your work need to go?
Well, actually, in a way, Giselle is probably an interesting example of that, where when it first went to North America, didn't necessarily find its audience, but more recently, and then particularly going down under, and then in Europe and so on, gathered a huge sense of our artistic momentum, which has led through to some of Michael's more recent work, perhaps. I mean, interestingly, with Tina talking about how you develop those long-term relationships, I suppose China and East Asia is known for just the centrality of the long-term relationship, and how you build that over time, and how that grows something really sustainable. And Tisa, I mean, in Hong Kong, and I suppose, of course, the larger context in Hong Kong is changing all the time, politically, economically, and so on. But how have you found that you can build those relationships, whether it's with audience or funders or the artists that you've worked with? And what are the most important things in that, in growing? Because you were telling me how, I mean, in a way, you've had some very interesting trends in the festival in terms of actually growth, audience-wise and funding-wise. So how have you managed to work through those relationships?
There's a whole bunch of questions in there. I'm just before I get into that, it's basically just to echo what Tina was saying about this and the platform that's here, and how very, very useful it is and how helpful it is. And also, I was just thinking about time and how the perception is that in Asia some things work much more slowly. You say yes, we'll do this very quickly, and you're actually talking 5 years. Whereas somebody says yes, we'll do this very slowly, and they're talking about 3 years. So I was very grateful, and I agree entirely with Tina about that time frame. So a lot of these conversations, a lot of this dating stuff takes a long time. In Hong Kong also, I think culturally, we've got a couple of really quirky things. The colonial history, the long colonial history, means that for us, for people in Hong Kong, from Hong Kong, anywhere that we come to, which is basically English speaking, feels at home, feels very comfortable, feels like this is totally part of our world. And we forget sometimes that we are actually, in some definitions, located in the Far East. I hate that word. You guys are in the Far West. I mean, come on, we're in the Central Kingdom.
That's why I said East Asia.
Thank you. Speaking from the Central Kingdom now, out here. Delighted to be out here. Of course, there are two that I'll get to being part of the Central Kingdom now, but from Hong Kong. I think one of the things that we're terrible at is saying what we do and promoting ourselves and saying how actually dynamic and interesting Hong Kong is and remains as a city. People who've been there know this and love it. People who've worked with us are happy to work with us again, mostly, I think. Yeah. But people who don't know us really haven't got a handle. We're not part of the mystic allure of the East. Everyone wants to go to Shanghai, Beijing, Tokyo, the romance. We're the business city. We're where you make a contract, it sticks, you do that, so kind of less interesting. But at the same time, for us, because we've had this long English history of understatement, and then we've got this Chinese tradition of modesty, welcome to my humble home with 87 rooms and whatever. So we're terrible at promoting ourselves and saying what we do. So, and I think to some degree that's internally as well as externally. Internally, at least we understand this, so we can get over it. Externally, it's a real stumbling block. So let me just be modest a little bit maybe, and just say very basically what we're doing in building partnerships locally. When the festival had always commissioned, it had always presented international work. So we would invite, we would commission, we would co-commission. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've started doing more producing work. So we're working more locally with artists, playwrights that we like, directors that we like, actors that we like. And it's been doing well. We've been winning awards locally. We have, because of this new work, and text-based work continues to be very important, so we publish these plays. And they're in English as well because we subtitle everything. I'd love to do headphones and not subtitle, but we haven't got the technology yet. So we do that, and because I think it is time for us to recognize that Hong Kong's position in the global world isn't just Hong Kong where you can come, but where Hong Kong can go to as well. So we're now using e-technology quite a lot. We've got kind of a cool iPhone app, if you want to check that out.
What's it called?
the Hong Kong Arts Festival.
Okay.
Just download for free on iTunes. Thank you. And there's the Hong Kong Arts Festival website, but also for these plays that we've published. The first one is now Kindle compatible. It's on Amazon, and then we're queuing. We're in line to put this on iPad compatible as well. So then now comes the partnership question. It's out there. How do we now reach the people that we would like this to reach, and how do we get that going? And in terms of the partnerships, now that we've got quite a good partnership going locally, how do we then take those relationships out? How do we maybe look at co-producing some of this stuff? I mean, you were saying probably just now that you have some partnerships and you put a lot of work out, and there is perhaps a perceived desire that you receive as well. I think you probably find that increasingly so. And certainly I think for Hong Kong, not everything is ready to travel. I totally take Dean's point. But I think some things are. And as a festival, we're maybe somewhat better positioned to see the potential of what might travel than otherwise. So those are the partnerships that we're hoping to build out of Hong Kong. And yeah, probably be a long date, okay? I understand this. A lot of your gentle hand-holding will have to happen first before we shake on the deal.
Modest.
Like,
and just on the funding side, Tisa, you have more or less doubled your funding, is that right, from the Hong Kong government?
From the government, yes, but having said which, yeah, it went up from, and this is in Hong Kong dollar terms, so it's much less than it seems, than it sounds. We went up from 18 million to 33 million Hong Kong dollars, so we're basically, the whole festival budget is a relatively modest one, actually, from about 10 million to 15 million US now. So we grew by about 50% in the last few years, which is
modest.
Especially at this time, I totally realize how privileged we are. Having said which, that government funding accounts for about 30% of our turnover.
And what was the key element in persuading them in terms of the relationship you have?
We showed them the return on investment. We said for every dollar we actually generate this much festival. So before the huge increase, we were getting something like 25% funding. So the rest was, our box office is about 46, 47. Okay. So we do need to, I mean, we want to serve the audience, you know, so connecting with the audience is important. And there's no point having work which is wonderful that we can't bring an audience to at home. And again, Tina said this, and I strongly echo it.
Yeah.
But also, just from financial point of view, we need to sell the tickets. The festival does 95-96% every year.
What you said as well, like creating the culture port, like what's the, you know, how does something bring in, we're also located on a harbor, but like what is the exchange? And you know, the world of presenting is changing. You know, presenting is becoming more like producing. We're definitely commissioning. In our case, we're setting up a for-profit wing that's basically agency. We're doing it anyway. We're supporting artists, like Padraig was saying, with all of these, like we're advising them internationally. We're helping create tours. Like instead of like an agent taking maybe 18 to 20%, we're just taking a small administration fee, and then it becomes more about like Harbourfront Centre's brand, I hate that word, but like being part of the community. And if there's no money necessarily to pay for entirely a show, like maybe we can set up, like we're working with the BAC to maybe do an exchange, our Hatch program, their Scratch program. Well, if their government can raise a few dollars to get those people over, we can do that. Then we have this international exchange. I'm sure I'd love to talk to Lachlan in his new role at, is it Lear? Like, you know, there we go. Like like because of the people, you know, those students, York University, we have an exchange. So any way that we can kind of rub $2 together to make an incredible partnership, And also those things are really driven also by the artists and their work. So it's like, how do you not be too aggressive in this, trying to keep the relationship like, so have you got my package, did you do this? But like more like, again, you can solve the problems with your work, like by animating certain areas, or and do your research, like you were saying, like, do not send me like something that has nothing to do with anything that I present. Like, look at what where you want to go, and what do they do, and how does your work will fit in it. It's a lot of work, but this is a commitment that if you want to tour your work, that's the readiness that you have to prepare.
Something also I'd just like to add, in terms of that kind of early stage of creating work and creating partnerships. We have at the National a really valuable resource in our studio, and it's a resource that is not specifically for the National, even though it's funded by the National. And we try and it crosses boundaries, it crosses way beyond England. We're interested in international partnerships. Now, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that the work that you might develop there ends up on the stages of the National, but it's to do with developing interesting artists who may come from all sorts of different cultures. And as we become more and more multicultural, that is of interest to us. It's a resource that will provide you with individuals, finance, equipment to start a journey that mightn't finish for 5 years or whatever, and it may not finish at the National's studio. But it's something that we enjoy doing, and making those new partnerships that then may go off on a separate journey and then may come back to us at some later stage in the guise of another production or a wonderful writer or director. So it's something just for you as creators and producers of work to be aware of. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an open door and everybody gets in it. You have to make your pitch. But it's an interesting kind of starting point and platform for those who want to sort of engage, certainly in the English scene, in some capacity to develop new work.
And Padraig, is there a formal process for sending in proposals, or like a number of calls, or is it more informal, just contacting key personnel?
Yeah, it's more informal. We're just about to appoint a new director for the studio, and that in itself, I think, presents us with an opportunity, because he or she, whoever it might be, will have their kind of interests. Some of it will come through Nick Heidner, the director. Some will come through contacts I've made. Some will come through contacts from our literary department. But there is a kind of a hothouse discussion about who is interesting and who kind of the new kid on the block is. We're always looking for that, partly because I sometimes worry, something I said right at the very beginning, that we seem kind of conventional in what we do. When Simon McBurney came to us first, he was kind of new kid on the block. He's now a very, very old kid, and everyone's had him.
That dating reference again.
So that would be exciting for us to kind of spot the new talents, even if they're not ready for our stages.
I think that's important to also, when I was talking about the portal, like all of the artistic directors that I mentioned before that I know, they all are like ambassadors for your work too. So like they see the work, and then when they, you're always telling, that's sort of what we do too. Like, so there's, you're promoted in many different ways, and not just your own promotion, I would say.
Just a final brief question for Tisa before we go out to the audience as well. Tisa, how do you see your relationship, and also how the Hong Kong art scene now relates into the Chinese mainland and to artistic partners there?
Thanks, Eugene. I realized I hadn't addressed that part. You had posed that question. I think we're still a gateway. I think we're an important gateway. We are now sometimes receiving work from people who really is more interested in going to China. And so we become part of the tour. China is changing rapidly. The ways in which it works also changes rapidly. And one of the things that Hong Kong is able to do is to facilitate some of those communications. I know that China, the Shanghai Festival, they reach out and they have possibly a more important international presence than Hong Kong at the moment, because this is the national level festival.
Like Shanghai.
Like Shanghai, yeah. And China is now much more aware of soft diplomacy than it ever used to be. So there's a lot of that going on, in addition to which the fascination of China, etc. I think in terms of how we work, basically all the festivals that I can think of in China are still very much run from the government, either the city government or the central government, or so it works probably in a very different way from the rest of the festival world. The Hong Kong Arts Festival works a bit more like the rest, and sometimes we understand that we're far away, and so when people come to us, they might like to configure a tour. So working with other Asian partners is something that we do all the time, and a bit like Tina, I'm toying with the idea of setting up festivals touring for Asia. So we do this all the time anyway, so we might as well just take it on and do it. We will. I don't think we'll set up festivals touring for China because it is a complicated business. But what we do is facilitate some of those conversations. So just recently, we received the Bridge Project, Richard III, and they were interested in being in Beijing. And one of my teams, in fact, went to facilitate those meetings. It's part of that partnership, to make the whole thing happen. So we're happy to do that. We will do that as much as we can. But it's interesting. I mean, China is such a huge, dynamic engine. We present work from China regularly, but it's very, very interesting. Actually, sometimes being in Hong Kong feels like you're living between two tectonic plates. It's exciting.
Nice way of putting it. I know we're tight on time because we're a bit late starting, but we have two roving mics here. Jane has one on that side, and Jen. And so we'll try and fit in as many comments and questions as we can. So perhaps I'd ask colleagues to be as concise as possible, and do please tell us who you are, maybe who you're working with, just in case we don't already know. And we'll try and get through as much as we can, and then just wheel back. But really, it's over to the floor. So who'd like to kick off? Willie White, new Artistic Director of the Dublin Theatre Festival.
Yay!
Thank you very much, Eugene. And for a long time, for 9 years, and late of Project Art Centre. Just to echo what has been said about how important the Traverse is for Irish theatre. It has really been, for a decade and a half, a very hospitable and very productive platform for Irish work. And what I'd like to see responding to Linda is actually a bit more reciprocity. The Traverse is a lot of work, and I'd be looking at ways to see how some of that can be shown in Dublin, perhaps during the Theatre Festival. But recognising the fact that there are a limited number of berths in the Traverse in any year, and there's a lot of Irish work out there, I'd like to remind people that if you keep going after London, there's a place called Europe, and we're members of the European Community. I remember we were at a conference on international affairs, and David Sullivan, who's the Director General for Trade, pointed out that as preoccupied as we might be with the BRIC countries, and of course they're important markets, that there are several hundreds of millions of people in Europe quite close by to us, and in quite a vulgar sense they're a market for the work. I think emboldened by the confidence that Irish companies get from presenting work and it being appreciated, particularly in Edinburgh, I think we can use that experience for the work to travel. Now, it's unfortunate that the IETM meeting in Krakow is happening at the same time as this meeting. It's one of those times when they line up with each other. But just to remind people that Europe is out there. Secondly, to say that yes, some things take a long time, but some things don't take a long time. So if we look at Broken Talkers in development in Dublin Theatre Festival last year, very quickly partners came on board in Noorderzon in Holland, and also the Locale Festival in Iceland, and it's been shown, it's opening on Saturday night here. So of course things can take all lengths of time, but the reason I say that is because I wouldn't want people to be daunted by the fact that only if you can spend 5 years will it happen. Some things probably work on a smaller scale can happen more quickly.
Thanks, Willie, for two really good comments. Great to see Locale here with us, and I know Mark from Noorderzon is also coming in, I think, tomorrow. And just to say, because Willie is on the board of IETM as well as running the Theatre Festival, in a way, maybe it's up to you to try and avoid a clash, whether you can persuade IETM. Indeed we are. Watch this space. Any other comments or questions from the floor? Please.
Hi, I'm Chris Campbell. I work at the Royal Court Theatre in London.
Chris, you're welcome.
The National Theatre in London. And I just wanted to reflect for a moment on that relationship you mentioned with Robert Lepage, because he doesn't come anymore, does he? And that, I suppose my question is, are these relationships inevitably personal? Because he fell out with the National Theatre, didn't he? And that can happen too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think they are personal, and I think they are to do with taste as well. And kind of an organisation like the National, or any company, its kind of motivation is from the artistic director, and the rest of us then have to follow along behind that. And sometimes it's time for new partnerships and new influences. It shouldn't be a foregone conclusion that if you have a relationship, therefore it will remain forever. I think the National has moved on. It's changed its style of work, and as a consequence, under Nick Heidner's leadership, those partnerships and those relationships have also changed.
We also used to premiere a lot of Robert Lepage's work in English, which was like nothing was ready, the technology didn't work, I mean it was, and then the work just got too big for our stages. And there was an opportunity, how I saw it, is to develop the next Robert Lepages, and there's space to move on. Interestingly, he and the Carrefour Festival are looking, the Ex Machina are looking at actually building a venue. So they've been asking me about how to run a venue. So it's kind of like now it comes back to the square one with the relationship, interestingly.
Interestingly, and thanks, Chris. And of course, the Royal Court, a great home from home for so many Irish writers over recent decades, for co-productions, of course, as well as for touring. Other comments and questions from the floor? Yes, please, towards the centre.
Carrying on with the attack on national I'm the executive producer. I'm Ian Gilly. I'm the executive producer at Curve Theatre in Leicester. And about 3 years ago, we co-produced an Akram Khan piece called In I with Akram Khan and the National Theatre.
And Juliette Binoche.
And Juliette Binoche. Yeah. And we were very pleased to get that. It was our inaugural year of the theatre being open. And in conversation with some of the staff of the National Theatre, it was a very, very difficult relationship with Akram Khan. Would that be correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, with all the fantastic resource the National Theatre has, we co-produced the last two Akram Khan productions at Curve, very, very successfully, I think. And it's nothing against the National Theatre, but the circumstance of us just suited Akram Khan's company ideally. We were able to give him a lot of space, a lot of time and a lot of support to work his piece and maybe work outside such a big structure, I suppose. So, we were very lucky to be able to make that relationship work. So I think my point is that big international artists don't necessarily need big international companies to work with.
Interesting, and Padraig may want to comment, but also I think governments may have to take some of the blame for that, because I think that was one of the tandem projects for the French presidency of the EU, and the French government and the UK government. There was an element of perhaps the origin of the project being slightly...
I mean, there were a hell of a lot of cooks trying to make kind of quite a small pie, and there were also some kind of artistic influences in there. One of them in the form of Juliette Binoche. Who's an extraordinary actress. She's not a great dancer. And there were moments when I thought, I wish she was acting and he was dancing. So, I'll be honest, I think it wasn't the best conceived project. But it may be totally down to the National Theatre getting it wrong, and well done, Cara, for getting the next two Akram Khan shows right.
Thank you indeed, Ian. Thank you, Padraig. Other comments from the floor?
May I just
sorry, Tisa, please.
One more comment about that particular
and feel
project,
free to jump in.
Which was in Hong Kong as well, and the dangers of working with certain stars. We found that we were subsidizing a large cosmetic brand for which a star was spokesperson. So, while we had sorted out all of the stuff to present the show, hours there, you know, in private time. There was a commercial activity which we were in no way able to anticipate, work with, work around, work in, you know. And I see this for many of us coming down the line. This is something that we all need to address, and it is something that we can only address together.
Very interesting point, actually. Thank you, Tisa. Any other comments? Not necessarily on Mademoiselle Binoche, but Odu, don't hold back. Do go ahead. This is extraordinary. Tom Creed, come on, Tom. No, Tom silent. Tom doesn't have a question. Extraordinary. Okay. Any other comments, or from our international colleagues? Again, I mean, there's an awful lot of experience in the room, obviously, in terms of the particular quirk. Yes, please, Chantal McCormick, Fidget Feet. One of our leading aerial companies.
Thank you. I was just thinking what Tina was mentioning about companies, are you ready? It's a really interesting thing to say about touring, because it's that kind of ladder that you feel you have to climb. So if you're touring internationally, then maybe people in your own country thinking, oh, maybe they are worth booking, or vice versa. So it's a really interesting thing for a young company to deal with. And touring isn't easy, but I feel that here in Ireland with Culture Ireland and theatre, the Irish Theatre Institute, exactly what you said, that they've been supporting us so much to maybe not make the big mistakes. So I think I've learned a lot over the last 2 years, and it is daunting to be told that I have to, that it takes 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years, because as a performer, I'm a little bit impatient and want to, be performing whenever we get to tour internationally, and I might not be in 10 years because, you can only do it for so long. So I think the question is, and what you said I think is good, is maybe to narrow it down to a certain number of people to try and make partners with. And do you feel that that's something that's worked for you in the past?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Like I remember you did. We talked about like the fact that you had a fairy tale work, and thought that would be a really good like Christmas show that would be maybe in all ages, like kind of guidance around. Again, there, like in Canada alone, according to the Canada Council, there's over 500 presenters. Like you have to really figure out and research like. Who else is doing work like, or presenting work like you're doing, so that you're not going into like a strict text-based play, unless you have a proposal that would be, if you're working with an Irish author or something, that you might be animating that. Like think of ways, like what are the hooks, like like when you do Flickr, like you do tags, like what are the tags of your work, and then try to match them like-minded. But I think that's really research. Like there's a lot of investment in really looking at who's doing what, who's doing similar things. Like we use the Irish Theatre Institute and really specifically target. Again, if you are doing a work and there's even 10, 15 people, and there's going to this festival, ask for those lists, say, it's only £79 to get up here, to see this work. People will make that if you're specifically targeting them. That would be my best. If you can see the work, that's the best thing.
Linda?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, however, I would hate anybody to leave this room thinking that there's a big problem, because actually it's one of the most impressive gatherings, the reception in Edinburgh, where people were hustling like nobody's business. Fantastic. You really are. Culture Ireland and Theatre Institute are doing a fantastic job, so please don't leave this room thinking...
I don't know what you mean. What do you mean, the problem?
No, I'm not suggesting you're making a problem, Tina.
No,
I just think that it's about... What I'm trying to say is be positive about it, because I think there's a lot of really, really positive energy. I think the messages are really clear that you're out to do business, and I think that's certainly my experience, and I just wanted to... I'm not saying for 1 minute you were saying anything.
I just didn't wasn't here. I didn't listen.
Oh, right, okay.
No, I'll just about North America. Also, or Canada. I'm going to just speak for Canada. There's, a lot of people making work, and there's so few opportunities to be presented. So it's like, how do you be competitive in that? And what you can do to do that is, do your research, know where you want to go, and how do you begin that conversation. There's a lot more opportunity here for sure.
Well, thank you. Now, we have a packed day, and I know we are about to decant to Project. And by the way, the new director of Project Art Centre, Cian O'Brien, is down there towards the back. Yes.
What's his name?
Just follow the scarf, and you'll get there. Now, and I'm about to hand you back to Jane, maybe for just to tell us what's happening next. But first of all, could I just thank our panel? I think these conversations are going to percolate through this afternoon, and the sustainability conversations continuing tomorrow. But to Padraig, to Tisa, to Mike, Linda, and Tina, thank you all very much.